Cop's target, a black homeless veteran at a diner until he makes one phone call and ends their career. In modern-day America, sometimes a cup of coffee and a small table can become the stage where truths far greater than any government building are laid bare. That was the fateful morning for Eric Hall, a man no one expected would shake an entire system with just one phone call. The city of Macon, Georgia, lay under a thick blanket of fog and a gray, overcast sky. The clock read 7:08 a.m. A crisp wind sliced through the worn layers of Eric Hall's old jacket. A former United States Marine who had served 3 tours in the Middle East, now homeless. But there was one thing no one could take from him: his dignity. Eric stepped into the Vineville Diner, a modest little restaurant nestled along Main Street, where he usually came every Tuesday morning if he had saved enough from odd jobs the day before. The familiar jingle of the bell above the door rang out. Edsel, the waitress, around 30, with hair braided into small twists, offered a warm smile. "Good morning, Mr. Hall. The usual?" she asked. Eric gave a slight nod, a faint smile appearing beneath his deep, tired eyes. The diner's owner, Galvin, a white man in his 60s with a thick southern drawl, was wiping down a table near the counter. He looked up and gave a nod, a habit that had lasted nearly 5 years. Eric chose the table by the window, where he could see the ancient oak trees across the street. He removed his tattered gloves and pulled a crumpled $5 bill from his coat pocket. Just enough for a small breakfast. 2 sunny side-up eggs, 2 slices of toast, and a cup of black coffee. "Hot coffee, Edsel." "Just like always," he said, his voice low but unwavering. The other patrons in the diner seemed accustomed to Eric's presence. An elderly white woman at the next table nodded politely, while others glanced briefly before returning to their newspapers or phones. To them, he was no longer a wandering stranger. He was part of the fabric of the diner, like the scent of burnt coffee beans or the morning news crackling from the dusty speaker in the corner of the ceiling. Edsel brought out the coffee. "Feels colder than yesterday, huh?" she said, setting the cup down gently. Eric thanked her with a look full of gratitude. "Cold, yeah, but at least I didn't get kicked off the bench by the bus depot guards this morning," he replied, half joking, half true. A pale ray of sunlight pierced the clouds, catching on the old bronze pin on Eric's knit cap, the emblem of the U.S. Marine Corps. Few noticed. But to those who knew, it wasn't just a decoration. It was a badge of honor, a scar of years spent fighting in Fallujah, Kandahar, and Mosul. No one in the diner yet realized that within minutes, a chain of events would unfold, starting from this humble breakfast table, that would ignite a storm spreading across America. And at the center of that storm was the man now quietly sipping his black coffee on what seemed like just another ordinary morning. If you're moved by this story so far, take a moment to hit subscribe so you won't miss the powerful and dramatic journeys ahead on Black Strength Stories. The doorbell rang again, not as gently as when Eric had entered. This time, the wooden door of Vineville Diner swung open forcefully, making the bell clatter as if shaken awake from sleep. 2 men in police uniforms stepped in, walking straight as if they had a target already in mind. No greeting, no nod to anyone in the diner. The one in front was Officer Orson, about 6'2", heavily built, with a square jaw and a high and tight haircut like a former football player. Behind him was Officer Riley, shorter, stockier, round-faced, holding a notepad and a silver-gray clipboard. Both were patrol officers from the Macon Police Department's West Division, usually assigned to handle minor disturbances in poor neighborhoods, where people like Eric often got attention, even when doing nothing wrong. "Good morning, officers," Edsel began, trying to stay calm. "Would you like a table by the window?" But no one answered. Officer Orson glanced past her as if she hadn't spoken. His eyes were already locked on Eric Hall, the man finishing the last bite of his eggs. "You," Orson said loudly, stopping at Eric's table. "Are you a customer here?" Eric looked up without haste. He set his fork down, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and then replied, voice slow and calm. "I'm a regular." "Every Tuesday morning." Riley cut in. "Have you paid?" Edsel stepped in immediately. "I served him," she said. "He paid in cash, like always. I took the order, gave him the receipt, and returned his change." But Officer Orson didn't take his eyes off Eric. "I asked him, not you," he said, each word clipped. The air in the diner instantly cooled. The clinking of cutlery stopped, and a man at a nearby table lowered his eyes to his phone. Eric slowly pulled out his wallet from his coat pocket, worn with fraying seams and leather polished by time. He took out a green card printed with the words, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, Service-Connected Veteran. Eric placed the card on the table as lightly as if he'd done it 100 times. Riley picked up the card and glanced at it. "Is this all you've got?" Eric looked him straight in the eye. "It's enough." Orson smirked, but didn't smile. "I asked if you have a receipt." "I do. But if you're asking, then Edsel's the one who gave it to me." Eric leaned back in his seat, arms folded, not as a challenge, but in defense, a habit from combat days. Edsel couldn't take it anymore. She walked straight behind the counter, pulled a white receipt from the cash drawer, its blue ink still fresh. "Table 4. Eggs, 2. Toast, 2. Black coffee. Total $5.75. Paid in cash. 7:14 a.m. She handed the receipt to Officer Riley. "Here, I wrote it myself. What more do you want?" But Orson didn't stop. "Mr. Hall, do you have any other ID on you?" Eric reached into his inner coat pocket again, this time pulling out an old driver's license, expired last year. "I don't have a permanent address, but I'm not evading the law, and I haven't broken any." The tension in the diner was thick enough to feel. A deliveryman waiting to pick up bread quietly backed toward the door, not wanting to get involved. Galvin, the owner, stepped out from the kitchen, dish towel still draped over his shoulder, face dark with anger. "What's going on here, officers?" he asked. "We received a complaint," Orson answered, still staring at Eric. "About a homeless individual occupying public space without payment." "Complaint from who?" Galvin frowned. Orson stayed silent. No answer. No name, no reported address. Just suspicion, and the power to question. And for Eric, this wasn't the first time. But this time, he knew. He wouldn't endure it in silence. The confrontation had only just begun, but the eyes in the diner were already choosing sides. And it wasn't the side of the men in uniform. "It's happening already." 3 simple words from Eric Hall, spoken in a calm, even tone, neither raised nor emotional, yet carrying the weight of a barbell dropped onto the floor. He didn't need to act authoritative. He had lived through places where authority meant nothing without discipline and courage. The phone he used was an old Nokia 3310, nearly extinct in the smartphone era, but that only made the call more mysterious. Officers Orson and Riley exchanged glances, momentarily uneasy. The entire diner fell silent. Even the sound of a spoon touching a plate rang out like an alarm clock bell. Less than 10 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up outside. Stepping out was a man in a dark gray suit, crisp white shirt, and navy blue tie. He wore no badge, but the way he walked and the look in his eyes made it clear. This was no ordinary man. He walked straight into the diner as if he knew every inch of its layout. He presented his ID, Neil Jenkins, U.S. Department of Justice. The entire room seemed to freeze. Neil glanced at Eric, then turned his razor-sharp gaze toward the 2 officers. We received a report of unlawful interference and harassment of a civilian, Neil said, his voice not loud but resonant. I need names, badge numbers, unit affiliations, and the exact reason why you two approached Mr. Hall. Orson, the taller one, stammered. He looked like a vagrant. Neil cut him off without blinking. Looked like. That's your legal basis for a stop? According to the state records of Georgia, Eric Hall is a former U.S. Marine who served in Fallujah and Tikrit. He has 2 Bronze Stars and an official commendation from the Pentagon. Riley began to sweat. Neil continued. Furthermore, Mr. Hall is currently enrolled in the Federal Reintegration Program and is under supervision from a Justice Department support team. You have inadvertently interfered with a federal file, and that alone is grounds for a state-level administrative investigation. Galvin, the diner owner, spoke up from behind the counter. He sits here every week, never caused trouble. This pisses me off. Neil gave a slight nod, and then turned back to Eric. We'll take it from here. You don't need to say another word. The atmosphere inside Vineville Diner remained thick, as if even time itself was holding its breath. Neil Jenkins, the representative from the Department of Justice, didn't need to raise his voice to command absolute silence. He pulled out a small plaque engraved in gold lettering, DOJ, Inspector Unit 3.7, Federal Oversight. It wasn't a typical business card, but rather a symbol of power and supreme oversight over state and local law enforcement agencies. Neil turned to Officer Orson and Officer Riley. I'm requiring both of you to provide your full names, badge numbers, unit identification, and the operational report within the next 30 minutes. Approaching a civilian who is having breakfast without a lawful reason may constitute a violation under Title 42, Section 1983 of the Federal Civil Rights Code. Riley's hands trembled as he pulled out his badge. Officer Riley, badge number 14,827, Macon Police Department, Central District Patrol Unit. Orson tried to keep his voice steady, but avoided eye contact. Officer Orson, badge number 13,210. We only received a call from someone in the area reporting a suspicious individual. Neil raised an eyebrow. A black man eating breakfast? That's your definition of suspicious? No one responded. Neil continued, his voice like ice. Mr. Eric Hall is one of 67 veterans currently enrolled in the DOJ Reentry Support Program, a federal initiative in coordination with the VA to reduce post-service homelessness rates. He holds a Purple Heart citation and served in Ramadi, Iraq, where 47% of the 3 to 5 battalion were wounded or killed in 2006. And today, he's interrogated by you for eating eggs and toast. The diner remained silent. From the register, Edsel quietly recorded the scene. A few other customers had also pulled out their phones. Social media was waiting. Neil took a deep breath, then spoke slowly. I will be reporting this directly to the DOJ Office of Internal Oversight. You'd better leave before this escalates beyond what your local department can contain. With no reason to stay, Orson and Riley exchanged a brief glance, then silently turned and walked out of the diner. No apology. No explanation. When the glass door shut behind them, a soft round of applause rose from the corner of the room. Not loud, but enough to make Eric turn and offer Edsel a small smile. Galvin, the owner, stepped out from behind the counter and placed a fresh cup of coffee on Eric's table. This one's on me, he said, because what you just did is what this whole city should have done a long time ago. Neil didn't sit down, but turned to Eric. We'll be monitoring this case, and I'll also need your statement for the administrative investigation. Not just about this morning, but any similar incidents you've experienced in the past. Eric nodded slowly. He had waited for this moment, not out of a thirst for revenge, but because he knew it was time the system had to face the truth. No more looking away. Right after the two police officers left Vineville Diner, a 3-minute and 48-second video appeared on TikTok from the account at Anna Louise 42, a communications student from Mercer University who happened to be present at the scene. In the video, Eric Hall is seen sitting calmly, facing the two officers, while a man in a suit, later identified as Department of Justice Representative Neil Jenkins, intervenes with a calm yet commanding voice. Within just the first 2 hours, the video surpassed 278,000 views, reaching the trending section under the hashtag #JusticeForEric. On Twitter, hashtags like #HomelessHero, #DOJ Steps In, and #Macon Truth appeared in high volume, with many high-profile social and political activist accounts resharing the clip. A tweet from Bernice King, daughter of Martin Luther King Jr., quickly went viral. No one deserves to be humiliated for being poor, especially someone who once put their life on the line for this country. Thank you, Eric Hall. Thank you, Department of Justice. Within 6 hours, the video was shared over 91,000 times on Facebook, with more than 24,000 comments, mostly expressing outrage, indignation, and demanding immediate disciplinary action against the two officers. A quick poll on Reddit's r/Macon forum showed that 87% of participants demanded an independent investigation into the Macon Police Department's abuse of authority. Major news outlets like CNN, MSNBC, and The Guardian US swiftly reached out to Anna Louise for video rights. By the next morning, the clip had been broadcast nationwide with the anchor's lead-in. This is a rare moment where a homeless veteran confronts injustice with calm, and truth is illuminated not by force, but by a phone call. At Mercer University, students organized an emergency forum on implicit discrimination and inequality in law enforcement. Over 300 students attended within just 12 hours of the incident going viral. A group of law students submitted a petition to the Macon City Council demanding the suspension of Officer Orson and Officer Riley, citing Section 6.2 on abuse of power and unlawful civilian engagement. The open letter attracted over 40,000 signatures on change.org overnight. Eric, though still not fully believing what had unfolded, was invited to an exclusive interview on CBS Morning to recount the full story. In the show's teaser clip, he simply said one sentence: "I'm not looking for fame. I just want to be treated like a human being." Outside Vineville Diner, reporters gathered. Galvin, the diner's owner, taped a handwritten sign to the glass door. "Here, everyone is treated with respect, whether they have a roof or not." As the media wave continued to spread, more and more questions arose. Who is Eric Hall? He wasn't just a homeless man unjustly questioned by two police officers. Behind those calm, quiet eyes seemed to lie an untold past. And the internet began its journey to uncover the answer. Within just 48 hours of the video going viral, reporters from The Atlantic, NBC Investigates, and a group of military history students from the University of Georgia traced the few remaining personal clues about Eric: a partially declassified military record bearing the name E.D. Hall, U.S. Special Forces, Unit 582, Iraq deployment, 2007 to 2010. Through these documents, it was revealed that Eric had been a staff sergeant in the United States Special Forces, deployed to Baghdad during the peak of the Iraq War. In a clash in the Sadr City district in 2008, Eric and his team rescued 12 civilians who had been unlawfully detained. That mission earned him the Bronze Star Medal for bravery, along with a Unit Medal of Valor from his Special Operations Command. The revelations didn't stop there. A former comrade, retired Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Merrill, called CNN directly to confirm: Eric is no ordinary man. He's the reason our entire unit survived the 2009 ambush in Fallujah. But what moved the public even more was the decline that followed his discharge. Medical records revealed that Eric suffered from severe post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, after returning home. While many of his fellow soldiers had families to help them reintegrate into civilian life, Eric, an orphan with no surviving relatives, faced the nameless nightmares alone. In 2012, he worked as a security guard for a warehouse on the outskirts of Atlanta, but a psychological crisis soon rendered him unable to continue. By 2015, he was living on the streets, moving between states, always carrying with him a cloth bag containing a few old uniforms, some photographs of his unit, and an unsent letter to someone named Linda, his fiancée, who had died in a car accident while he was still deployed. These revelations completely transformed how the public viewed Eric. The image of a man sitting quietly in a small diner, not yelling, not resisting, making a single phone call, was now inseparable from the story of a true hero. A man who once stood on the front lines between life and death to protect others, now betrayed by the very system he had served. Veterans organizations began speaking out, including Veterans for Justice, Homes for Heroes, and Wounded Warriors Project, offering Eric housing, medical care, and trauma counseling. A GoFundMe campaign launched by the Macon community aimed for $50,000, but within 3 days, it surpassed $178,000, with thousands leaving messages. Thank you for what you've done for this country. Now it's our turn to make sure you're not alone. And while society burned with anger over the missteps of 2 officers, it also began confronting a deeper, more painful truth. That sometimes, those who sacrifice everything for their nation are the very ones left voiceless in the heart of a peaceful city. Since Eric Hall's past was revealed, and the video went viral across social media platforms, the community in Macon, a city once accustomed to turning a blind eye to the homeless, began to awaken. Those who used to glance at him with suspicion on the streets now returned to Vinville Diner, not to have breakfast, but to shake his hand, bow their heads, and offer words of gratitude. Within a week, Vinville Diner had become a symbolic destination. Owner Galvin had to hang a sign reading "Indoor Service Only" because the crowd was overwhelming. Some came just to see Eric, others brought flowers, handwritten letters, or even military memorabilia to give him. A middle-aged man named Ralph, a veteran of the Gulf War, shed tears as he placed a silver Marine Corps pin on Eric's table, a badge he had kept for 30 years. Ralph said, "You fought for me. Now it's my turn to stand for you." The charity organization Homes for Heroes immediately reached out to Eric, offering full support for an apartment in the North Highlands area, along with a 12-month therapeutic counseling program. Warrior Reentry Network also contacted him, proposing to enroll him in a job retraining program to help him re-enter the labor market through a network of local businesses. These were not just words. The community followed through with action. A local contractor pledged to renovate Eric's new apartment, providing furniture, fresh paint, and a safe electrical system. The local Walmart store donated a $3,000 shopping card. A retired military psychologist, Dr. Merrill Jenkins, volunteered to counsel Eric for the first 6 months at no charge. Central High School organized a student-led assembly called Gratitude for Service, where Eric was invited as the inaugural guest speaker. The most unexpected initiative came from a group of law students at Mercer University. They launched a campaign called the Hall Reform Project. Under the guidance of a civil rights law professor, the group collected signatures demanding that the city government review and revise its policies for approaching and assisting homeless individuals, especially veterans. Over 12,000 signatures were gathered in just 10 days. At the same time, Macon's mayor, Ernest Colburn, was compelled to hold an emergency press conference to address failures in the local veteran support system. Under public pressure and from advocacy groups, he pledged to restructure the city's Department of Social Services and ordered the establishment of a dedicated office for homeless veterans. It seemed a wave of humanitarian awakening was spreading, not just from respect for Eric, but from a collective sense of shame. That for years they had lived alongside a hero, dined at the same diner, walked the same streets, yet never once asked if he was okay. Eric didn't say much. He simply smiled, nodded, and offered thanks with eyes quiet but shining. To him, this change wasn't about fame. It was a sign that even slowly, justice can find its way back when the human heart still knows how to respond to what is right. In the third week after the video of the confrontation at Vineville Diner went viral across social media platforms, pressure on the Macon Police Department reached a peak. More than 200,000 signatures on an online petition demanding an investigation into the misconduct of officers. Orson and Riley were delivered to the mayor's office, accompanied by hundreds of calls from citizens, veterans, and human rights organizations. Facing mounting public backlash, Macon Police Chief Janice Mallory held an emergency press conference. During the 18-minute session, she confirmed that the Internal Affairs Division had completed its internal investigation. The 32-page report concluded that both officers had violated at least 4 provisions of the Code of Conduct toward Citizens, including abuse of authority, Section 2.4, discrimination based on economic status, Section 3.1, failure to follow proper procedure, without legal cause for document check, Section 5.6, and disruption of peace at a civilian establishment, Section 7.2. Immediately afterward, Officers Orson and Riley were suspended without pay for 60 days, with a requirement to complete mandatory training on civil rights and nonviolent engagement with the public. But the disciplinary measures did not end there. A civilian ethics review board, comprising community representatives, former law enforcement officers, and legal experts, was formed to evaluate whether the 2 officers should be allowed to return to active duty. A notable revelation from the investigation was that over the past 5 years, Orson had been the subject of 7 complaints related to excessive force or racial bias, all of which were internally closed without disciplinary action. Meanwhile, Riley, a rookie officer with only 9 months on the force, had accompanied Orson in 3 prior incidents that raised concerns of procedural misconduct. This incident ignited fierce debate during city council meetings. Some council members called for a comprehensive review of the disciplinary records of all active officers. A new civilian police oversight committee was established, with authority to access internal files that were previously restricted to high-ranking officials. This was seen as a turning point in restructuring Macon's police oversight system. Additionally, under pressure from human rights advocates and veterans organizations, the city passed a $2.3 million budget for a 2-year humane response program, requiring all police officers to undergo intensive training on conflict resolution, implicit racial bias, and fundamental civil rights. Just 3 weeks after the incident at Vineville Diner, the name Eric Hall had become the subject of countless articles, analysis videos, and television programs discussing justice, discrimination, and the post-war lives of veterans. But Eric chose not to remain in the noisy spotlight. He chose action. The first invitation came from a public high school in Macon, where 3 students had recently been suspended for overreacting during a racially biased bag check. At his first talk with nearly 300 students, Eric didn't speak much about the diner incident. Instead, he recounted a moment in 2006 when he had to crawl through a mud-filled ditch in Fallujah to rescue a fellow soldier trapped under enemy fire. I didn't think about the color of his skin. I just knew we were brothers, he said, his voice deep and steady. The sincerity and composure in Eric's storytelling silenced the entire auditorium. A female student stood up and asked, "Were you scared?" He nodded. Of course. But fear isn't the problem. Giving up because of fear is. Soon after, local veteran organizations and psychological support centers for discharged soldiers began inviting Eric to speak and participate in forums. During a seminar at Mercer University, he shared a shocking statistic. In America, more than 37,000 veterans are homeless, and every night, about 13,000 sleep in cars or under bridges. He didn't just cite data, he described nights curled up at bus stops, mornings waking with frozen feet, and the eyes of strangers avoiding his own. One particularly impactful moment was when Eric emphasized the difference between empty gratitude and real action. "We don't need more, thank you for your service. We need policy. We need housing. We need healing," he said, during a panel discussion that drew over 10,000 online views. At a community forum at the Bibb County Cultural Center, Eric read aloud a handwritten letter from a young soldier currently serving in Syria, who said that watching the video of Eric inspired him to seek psychological counseling, something he had previously viewed as a sign of weakness. Silent tears rolled down Eric's cheeks as he folded the letter. The mayor of Macon, Ellison Price, also invited Eric to join a new advisory committee on veteran policies. Although Eric declined an official role, he pledged to support the effort by sharing his lived experience. "I'm not an expert," he said in a televised interview. "I'm just someone who lived through it and doesn't want anyone else to go through it alone." At a veteran job fair, Eric stood in the booth for Bridgeback, saying, "Every person here has a story worth hearing. I just happen to be one of the lucky ones who got to tell mine." 6 weeks after the story at Vineville Diner spread across social media platforms, Eric Hall's life began turning a new page. No longer the quiet man who walked into the diner each morning wearing worn-out shoes and an old slung backpack, Eric had now become a symbol of resilience and positive change in the Macon community. Through a connection with the nonprofit organization Honor Haven, Eric was placed in a small apartment at Lakewood Commons, a housing complex reserved for veterans in special circumstances. The 2-bedroom apartment, with windows overlooking a garden filled with golden chrysanthemums, marked the first time in nearly 7 years he could lock a door and call a place home. Rent was covered by a community fund for the first year, on the condition that Eric continue participating in local support programs. For work, Eric was hired as a warehouse supervisor for a local relief food distribution center. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, meaningful, and gave him a sense that he was still serving. On a typical workday, he oversaw the packing of more than 2,000 food packages, personally inspecting deliveries sent to over 50 homeless families each week. Beyond stabilizing his personal life, Eric became an active volunteer for Second Boots, a Georgia-based veteran support network. Every Wednesday night, he and the team visited low-income motels, parks, and bus stations in search of forgotten servicemen. He brought water, coats, and more importantly, hope. A highlight of Eric's new chapter was the radio show The Empty Backpack, broadcast every Sunday morning on WMGZ. On the show, he shared authentic stories of veterans, frontline memories, and lessons from life after war. The program averaged more than 28,000 listeners weekly and became a forum connecting veterans to the civilian world. The press continued to follow Eric's journey. An article in the Atlanta Voice titled "From Under the Bridge to Inspiring a City" quoted him saying, "I don't need to be rich or famous. I just need to wake up each morning knowing I'm still useful to someone." Galvin, the owner of Vineville Diner, had become one of Eric's closest friends. Every Saturday morning, he invited Eric for a free meal and discussed plans for organizing local veteran fundraisers. He used to be a regular. Now he's the pride of this place, Galvin said. The Macon community no longer saw Eric as a homeless drifter. They saw him as a living testament to recovery, a clear reminder that when someone is given a chance, they can rise not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. And as the sun set over the little home Eric now called his own, he often sat on the porch, sipping coffee, watching the distant lights. He knew he had come a long way, not because of luck, but because of resilience, and because helping hands reached out at just the right time. Perhaps what touched millions of hearts about Eric Hall's story wasn't that he had once been a warrior, but that in the very moment he was underestimated, he still held on to his dignity. He didn't slam a table. He didn't shout. Just one phone call, one calm gaze, and the world stopped to listen. Behind the dust of war and homelessness was a man whose value never faded, who still fought, not with weapons, but with patience and truth. The real question isn't just, why was Eric treated that way? But how many others like him are quietly enduring injustice without our knowledge? Share this story if you believe every person deserves respect, whether in uniform or in worn-out clothes. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the Black Strength Stories channel so you won't miss the next powerful and inspiring tale. Because once the truth speaks, silence is no longer an option.